I'd like to reconvene the Lane County Board of Commissioners for our afternoon session of August 16th. We got a couple items of public works this afternoon with some carryover from this morning and an executive session. So with that, I'd like to start with Public Works item 13A. It's order 16-8-16-8 in the matter of the Meadowlark East Oak, Savannah, and Woodland Phase 2 restoration project on Mount Pisgah within the Howard Buford Recreation Area, and authorizing any revenue generated by the project to offset project costs and be reinvested in the Buford Park, and designating authority to the county administrator to execute agreements and contracts associated with the project. Wow, that's a long run-on sentence. Got her though. So we have with us Mike Russell, our parks manager, and I guess Ed Alverson. I don't know if I've met Ed. And then we have Chris Horsinger. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon, board. Yes, so this is Ed's first appearance before the board. Ed came on board in November. So Ed is our natural areas coordinator for parks and works closely on these types of projects with the Friends of Buford Park. And as you mentioned, Chris Horsinger, Executive Director of Friends of Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, is here as well. So yeah, I'm going to turn, most of the presentation is going to be handled by Ed, and then Chris is here for color commentary or fill in of any details that any questions you might have. And as you know, we did phase 1 of this project in 2012. Went very smoothly, and you'll see part of our presentation today is giving you an update on that project, and then talking about phase 2. One of the things that we did not do in phase 1 was ask for that county administrator authority. Part of the match money for this project is the timber revenue from the selective logging. So we want to make sure we have authority. Parks has authority to pass that money through as match money. So when we get the revenue, we can pass it on and pay the bills for the project. So we want to make sure we get that straight right up front. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Ed. He has a short presentation, and then we'll open it for discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, this is an update of an ongoing project, and we're poised to move into phase 2. Yeah, why don't you drive? Just give you a little bit of background, a reminder about the importance of Howard Buford Recreation Area for habitat conservation. There's over 1,000 acres of prairie and savanna and oak woodland habitat within HBRA, and that's a particularly important habitat type that's been identified, for example, in the Oregon Conservation Strategy that was put together by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and other conservation planning documents that kind of look at the Willamette Valley-wide conservation needs. And the reason this is an important habitat is because it was once very extensive with millions of acres, and it's declined a great deal in extent over the last 150 years. These habitats support a number of rare species. Conservation targets is kind of the jargony term that are found in within the park. And there's, particularly with these prairie and savanna and oak woodland habitats, there's a need for ongoing habitat management to sustain these conservation values. This is not, like I said, the first time we've been talking about doing savanna restoration, and this map shows the entire park, and the diamonds, the icons, represent locations of different projects that have been done over the years in partnership, Lane County Parks and Friends of Buford Park. The first one was along the Summit Trail near the top. That was done in 2008. Very successful project. The Springbox project up in the northwest corner of the park. And then the Meadowlark area down here in the southeast corner of the park. It's accessed from the east trailhead off of Ridgeway Road. I was going to mention at that slide that a big part of the implementation of these projects has been outreach to the public and showing the public what it looks like to undertake these projects, because cutting trees down in an area that's being managed as a natural area is kind of a counterintuitive thing for some people. So that public outreach component has been a big piece of it. I'm going to show a sequence of aerial photos of the project area and its surroundings, and this is in the southeast corner of the park. Here's the east trailhead right here. There's a BPA power line here and another one, not shown on this photo, but right about there. And so this is a 1965 aerial photo taken just a few years before the park was established. And then we'll skip ahead to 2011, and Mike, if you can toggle back and forth. This gives you an idea of the vegetation change that's happened in the park since it was established. It's a dynamic ecosystem. And so some of the changes are positive, some of them are maybe not so positive for our conservation targets. And this is part of the analysis that leads us to the conclusion that we need to take these steps, this active management, this tree removal, to sustain the conservation values in the park. So this is this aerial photo was taken before the first phase of the Meadowlark project, and that work area was right in here. And if Mike toggles back and forth now, you can see the selective removal and leaving mostly oak trees and a few Douglas firs in this area if we compare the before and the after. And so the second phase is going to be working in this area here and doing similar types of thinning, some areas of savanna restoration, some areas of woodland restoration. Then we've got some on-the-ground photos. Actually, if you could go back one slide, taken right here at this trail junction, and there's a kiosk if you've been up there, looking to the north. And so this is an on-ground view before any work was done in November of 2011. And then in the following summer, just as work was starting, a few of the younger firs had been taken out. And then right after the work was completed in the winter of 2013, and then this is what it looked like this spring. So it's a pretty dramatic transformation. You know, for me being a plant ecologist, it's really exciting to see the changes and to be able to experience these dynamic ecosystems. Now here's a map of the project, and this is actually included in your packet near the end of the memo. And this is the entire Meadowlark project area here. The area that's somewhat opaque, that's the phase 1 area done in 2012. So the work that's proposed for this year, there's an area that's mostly prairie and it's just a few small hardwoods that are being removed in the red area, and that'll be mowed. And then areas that are outlined in white are proposed for savanna restoration. So that's, you know, leaving about a tree per acre. That'd be a fairly dramatic change. And then the areas that are outlined in the yellow, woodland restoration. So that's leaving a higher tree density, maybe 5 to 10 trees per acre, something like that. And then we have some text about the different treatments that will be implemented, including a lot of understory vegetation treatment, particularly addressing non-native species like blackberry and Scotch broom and things like that. Talk a little bit about approvals. The process was that Friends of Beaufort Park came to Lane County Parks with a project proposal, and actually it was based on a grant application that was submitted to OWEB and funded by OWEB. So that was approved internally by park staff. We presented on this project to the Parks Advisory Committee in their June meeting, and they passed a motion supporting the project. Some of the PAC members had toured the project area and were impressed by what they saw. Okay, it was unanimous approval. And then we have this proposed board order requesting authorization to apply the timber revenue to offset the restoration project costs. And then just a little bit about the funding. This is what was in the grant application, $106,000 OWEB grant, and then match funds of at least $55,000, $20,000 from Friends of Beaufort Park in Mount Pisgah, and then at least $35,000 from Lane County in the form of the revenue from the timber that's removed, timber and chips. And that the actual number is probably going to be higher than that, and we'll apply the amount that is received to restoration work within the park. We have time for questions if you have any.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Bozovich?
Sure, this is one I like to ask just because I already know the answer somewhat. Is oak savanna a native and natural habitat to the Willamette Valley, or does it have to be maintained?
Well, it depends upon how you define native and natural. But most ecologists would include it within that definition because it was habitat that was maintained largely by burning by Native Americans for thousands of years. They harvested food plants from the prairie and savanna habitats. There's archaeological evidence going back 7,000 years of camas harvest and camas ovens. So, again, it depends upon how you define natural, but
Yeah,
most of us do.
Without human interference, it would not be a habitat that would normally occur except for in transition from possibly a burn area back to what is the late succession of the Willamette Valley, which is evergreen forest. Or if it's
Yes.
down in the wet area, it's other species, but it's not. We have to do something to maintain it. I kind of like to point that out that it's a great habitat to try and maintain, though, because it does support a lot of species that are in decline, particularly our state's, bird, which, needs that habitat. But it's also interesting that in order to maintain it, generally requires burning. So my follow-up question is there a plan for maintenance on this, and what is that maintenance regime?
Yeah, there is a plan. And I think, burning and mowing are the primary methods for maintaining prairie and savanna habitat in the Willamette Valley. And both of those are used at Mount Pisgah. I think the first controlled burn was in 1999.
Yes.
So there's a history of working with partners to successfully implement fire management. And much of this is now being done within the context of the Rivers to Ridges partnership. So a lot of collaboration happening, most recently last fall with the Springbox unit where there was a prescribed burn implemented.
Yes, I was going to add the burning is important because it's one of the most effective and efficient, cost-effective maintenance tools. Yes, you can mow, but with those slopes with rocky soils, the equipment takes a beating. But to your first question, because I've given it a lot of thought, with thousands of years of maintenance of that habitat, it was also, there's been, some climatic fluctuations. We had a warmer, drier, hotter, more fire-prone period 15,000 to 5,000 years ago, I'm told by the researchers who look at these lake bed sediments and find the layers of ash from great big fires in the sediments of the lakes that have been received these fire events. And so our knowledge of prehistory is as best as our science understand it. But ignition by lightning, of course, occurs frequently in the conifer forests of the higher elevations, in our forests that produce timber forests, and also ignition by lightning has been part, in addition to the Native American burn. So I think of it as with the prospect of warming climate, whatever you determine the source is, or it is happening. The evidence is quite clear that it is in our interest to kind of make our park more fire resilient. And that's, I think, one of the most notable benefits is having that dense young fir removed so that we can accomplish a prescribed fire, as a way to avoid the risk or reduce the risk of fire spreading from the park to neighboring lands.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, which came first, chicken or egg, but it is also interesting, climate does change, and it was probably more of a natural habitat, 10,000 years ago in the valley, and changes and cools down and becomes more of the evergreen forest. And, being in a lower elevation doesn't have as much lightning ignition as the upper elevations do. So man decided to start burning it to maintain their food source, and we've been doing it ever since. So just
Active
it's one of those-
management is something we personally advocate for our natural areas, for the
and
Friends.
active management of our public lands is something I've promoted for a long time, so I'm not going to go after being actively managing this piece of our public lands, and I understand the reasoning behind it, but it's always a kind of a curious thing what we do sometimes as humans. And in the face of climate change and all the issues people are worried about, we're actually planning to either burn fossil fuels by mowing or burn the actual vegetation out there purposefully to manage and maintain a habitat, which I'm going to get phone calls about as soon as you guys set the first prescribed burn out there, because I've got a couple regulars that call me, whether it's the West Eugene wetlands and the BLM out there, or it's us on whatever property. If we're doing prescribed burns, there's a group of folks out there that don't think we should be doing any. So, thanks.
Commissioner Lycan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mike, maybe this is to you. And I may have missed it. If you had it up there, I apologize. But do you have an estimation on how much revenue will be generated by this project?
Commissioner Stewart, Commissioner Lycan, the reason we don't know quite yet is because we haven't had, the bidding for the logging yet, and so we don't know what the wood prices are going to be yet and all that kind of stuff. But, about 50,000.
Okay.
So, just like Ed said, we're anticipating 35 or so to go to funded tasks for the project. The other 20 that may come. There are unfunded tasks for the project that we would want to put that money towards.
And you're confident that the revenue generated should be enough to offset the costs that are being put forth?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, I'd like to kind of expand a little bit on that, because this has been kind of my background before I became a commissioner. So, it would have been nice to maybe have an estimate or a cruise of the volume that was going to be taken off. And then whether or not all the trees are merchantable and the firs, because, the business I used to do, we used to work for different percentages depending on what some of the outcomes are. And, looking at the aerials is hard to tell, how mature the trees are, but you would have probably got the whole project done and still had revenue left over, if I could understand exactly, what ages and what the work requirements are. I think that would be helpful for me. And then the other question I have is that how did we determine that? Are we trying to return all, or I should say, are we trying to create oak savanna in this entire area? How did we set the boundaries of where we're going to try to return certain types of vegetation in the park? How was that determined?
Well, I want to say first, there has been a cruise, and it's partly I'll give you a few numbers, that there was a projected volume of merchantable timber at 213,000 board feet. And while the projected value is what's fluctuating because of the timber prices, as you probably know, are often lower at the end of the summer than in the beginning of the summer. So
Sometimes.
yeah.
It just depends on market, what boards are selling for and what people are, housing starts and stuff. So
We're trying to be very conservative about what we expect to get, because our last round in 2012 was, we thought there might be more value than actually came when the Lane County sold the timber to the mills. Mm-hmm. There's another slight thing that may be of interest, that we did retain some cedar logs last time that had relatively lower value at the mill, and privately milled them with a small on-site mill to create board material, lumber for use in the park. But what I really appreciate about Lane County Parks' plan is to put the resources, keep the resources from any timber sold at the park for either restoration or recreational projects. And I think that's a good message for the public.
Sure, and I agree with you. I'm not disputing that. I just, like I said, I spent 18 years doing this exact type of work, and for me, for useful information, it would have been nice to have a breakdown of the, estimated volume, which you did give me here, and it would, what's merchantable, what's not merchantable, what would be sold for chips. I mean, typically,
I think the value of chips was estimated at $11,000.
yeah. So that information, and then what's the requirement of the logger? I mean, typically, we did work based on a percentage, so hypothetically, we might work for a 60-40 split of the percentage, and then we might pile all the brush, and we might do a bunch of the stuff included. So, it might be worth me taking a tour and just giving some thoughts to Mike and on, what I've experienced in the past, and see,
We'd be happy
we're
for
headed in the
that.
right direction.
Happy to do that.
I might also add that some of the conifers will be left. Basically, all of the trees over 28 inches in diameter will be left, and only a small number of the Douglas firs over 21 inches will be left. So it will be a selective project.
And you were speaking, your question also said, are we trying to create that savanna density across the whole park? Or, we're focusing just first on this area. As we continue to get better at this work, and as the restoration science evolves for savanna restoration, there's a lot of projects being done, but it's still pretty much the last 30 years. And as the map indicated, the areas in yellow are really the oak woodland, where there is a canopy that intersects in creating shade. And that's where there's a certain understory diversity of plants and animals that relate to that. There's a different plant community in that open prairie community, and that supports, as was mentioned, our Oregon state bird, the meadowlark, and other grass nesting birds as an example. And then there are areas that are more complete prairie, and that's shown in the red, and they're already, there's very few trees in there for other reasons, either the hydrology is not suitable. So we're trying to work with the potential of the site while increasing diversity across the park, I would say, is the long-term goal, so that we have more resilience for these species that are stressed.
So let me tease this out just a little bit more. So how did you come to the conclusion that this is what values and what you wanted to create here with that environment? Because, I've been out there a few times. I certainly haven't been all over the property. Some of the times I've been out there, been with the Arboretum, and they talk about others. They like to showcase 7 different ecologies or 7 different types of stands and different values. So I'm just kind of curious, what type of a process did you go through to determine and what type of outcomes that you wanted? You have touched about different species and different things that you're trying to promote. How did you come to that? What was the process that took place?
Well, I can say that for an example of a criteria when we're looking at a conifer stand, if it may still have an old oak in it that is declining, but perhaps the understory has converted to the common sword fern. In other words, there's not a remnant reservoir of the wildflowers and native grasses that normally would be under an oak savanna or an oak woodland. That would be, that's already converted. It's too much work to convert that stand of conifers to oak savanna. But you look in other areas where the oaks under the fir are increasingly in design and a threat of the shade of the growing oaks, because the conifers will eventually shade out and kill the oaks. And we have that understory health. That's a good place to target removing. So partly to sustain those legacy large, beautiful oaks that are still there from 150, 200 years ago. Do you have anything you'd want to share?
But it's really about looking at what's there and working with nature to identify how you can kind of nudge the habitat conditions. It's constrained partly by where were there prairie and oak habitats in the past. So we wouldn't try to create an oak savanna in an area that has never been oak savanna. And then also, thinking about where we can kind of nudge the trajectory of habitat change rather than make a big shift. Another factor that comes into play, though, that I was going to point out here, and if you look at the slide, this area right here is part of the savanna restoration, and that was intentionally done there to provide a connection between this area up here, which has quite a bit of savanna, and this area here. So there's kind of a habitat configuration consideration as well. You want the animals, for example, that are associated with savanna habitats to be able to move from here to here and vice versa. So thinking about the blocks of habitat and how they relate to one another is another part of the process.
Well, thanks. That was what I was trying to tease out. I appreciate it. I didn't want to say that, well, Faye Stewart likes old growth trees, so I want to turn this whole area into old growth fir trees, or Commissioner Bozovich loves oak trees and he wants to just see oak trees grow there. I mean, I wanted to kind of tease out how you assess the area and what aspects are most beneficial in trying to come up with what values we're trying to produce here for this area. So,
And within
thank
the
you for
park
that.
as a whole, we can make everyone happy.
Yeah. All right. Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also the funding agencies have given this a priority. So there's money available for this type of work. So we identified areas within Buford Park that could take advantage of that funding. And this is one of the areas. One thing I do want to make the board aware of, we are working on a comprehensive habitat management plan for the whole park. And that's currently being worked through our Parks Advisory Committee and a public process for them to provide a recommendation to you on that plan that would cover the whole park and talk about a mix of different habitats throughout the park to provide that balance to see what opportunities are there that we can take advantage of, and opportunities that, like the North Slope, for instance, that's already conifer forest. Maybe there's not much management that happens there because it's already converted and that's what it is. So that will be coming to you at a later time, but there is efforts underway to have a comprehensive plan for the park.
Good. I look forward to that. Commissioner Sorensen?
Thank you very much. Well, this is exciting to see this. I mean, literally, you can see it going from, 2011 and before to now. And, on a personal level, I really enjoy that part of the park. And I think that the photos were rather dramatic in terms of showing the restoration of that oak savanna habitat. And I'm glad to hear that there is money available to fund this. And I think that as the public understands what we're trying to do there in terms of I don't want to say recreating the habitat, but restoring the habitat, I think that we'll get more and more support for it. I do have a question about the oak, because we hear that word oak, the oak savanna habitat. I know there's two species, the Oregon white oak and the California black oak, but I don't know much about the differences between those two, and I wonder if one of our illustrious speakers here who know more about oak trees than maybe the rest of us, if you could, and as I understand it, the black oak, the California black oak, only is in the southern Willamette Valley. So I'm just curious, since we're in the southern Willamette Valley, how much of this oak habitat is black oak and how much is white oak?
Yes, Oregon white oak is found throughout the Willamette Valley. California black oak is at its northern range limit in Lane County. Cox Butte, actually, is the very northernmost spot, right near the Long Tom River. And California black oak is really only on the west side of the Willamette River, with one exception. There's one tree in the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, and nobody is sure how it got there. So for all practical purposes, if you were talking about an Oak Savannah site, say in the ridge line around Spencer Butte, you'd be talking about a mixed black oak, white oak situation, but at Mount Pisgah, it's basically all white oak.
Okay.
Another easy thing that I enjoyed learning whenever I did is the lobed, rounded leaves of the white oak, or all white oaks generally, compared to the pointy parts of the black oaks. So that's an easy way to distinguish them.
Okay, and are there differences in the habitat in terms of the animals and plants that are in that habitat?
Well, to get technical, one difference is that the acorns of white oaks mature in 1 year, and the acorns of black oaks take 2 years to mature. So that means that the maturation of acorns is spread out. It's not synchronous for the two species. So wildlife species that depend upon acorns, like acorn woodpeckers or western gray squirrels or deer, there's a more reliable supply of food for them that these mixed stands provide.
And last but not least, in a paragraph or two, why is it important to restore oak savanna habitat?
Well, in the Willamette Valley in particular, there are a number of species that are really strongly associated or restricted to this habitat type. So the fate of those species is really dependent upon us being able to perpetuate the habitat. And the more we can focus on managing the habitat, it's really a more cost-efficient way of implementing conservation, a habitat perspective, rather than a species-by-species perspective.
I'm always looking for ways to resonate with a layperson, but I often say that the oak and the acorns in particular is a grocery store of the prairie, and it's where the food source is. And it's rather interesting from our human cultural history that most of the civilizations that have developed in the temperate regions, whether that's the Indus Valley or the Euphrates, these civilizations have developed in association with oak woodlands and oak savannas, and probably because people incorporated in their diet, as they still do today in Spain and other parts of the world, oak acorn meal. So it's just kind of a nice. And then of course there's the building supplies of the durable hard oaks. So we have a long relationship as a human species with oaks.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with that, thanks for that information. We do have a 2 o'clock time certain, so if we're ready to move this item, I would appreciate a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Farr?
move passage of Order 1608 in the matter of the Meadowlark East Oak Savannah and Woodlands Phase 2 Restoration Project on Mount Pisgah within the Howard Buford Recreation Area, and authorizing any revenue generated by the project to offset project costs and be reinvested into Buford Park, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute agreements and contracts associated with the project.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? I've seen none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Russell, just before you leave, were we successful in the monument getting installed at Wildwood this weekend?
Yes, thank you, Chair Stewart. This weekend, we had a Boy Scout project at Wildwood Falls that included a memorial sign basically honoring those that have lost their lives at the falls. And so the Boy Scouts all showed up. They made a really nice kind of area around the sign with rocks, and they laid soil fabric and then soil and then bark chips. The sign itself lists those who have died since the mid-'70s. There's, I think, 12 people that have died there during that time. And it was just a reminder to those visiting the park to be mindful of using the falls for a swimming area. So it's a beautiful memorial, and I just publicly want to thank the Boy Scouts. And Milo is the Boy Scout, and I can't remember his last name right now. I apologize, but we do plan to give him some recognition in the future.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay. So with that, I'd like to bring up item 13B. It's Order 16-08-16-09 in the matter of considering offers received for the Forest Work Camp and providing direction to staff to negotiate an agreement or take other action. We have with us Betty Michaud, our Fleet and General Services Management Analyst, and we have Brian Craner, our Capital Projects Manager, and also James Cheney, our Assistant County Counsel. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair. The matter that we're bringing to you today is the consideration of offers for the Forest Work Camp and providing directions to staff to negotiate an agreement or take other action. To give the Commissioners plenty of opportunity to discuss the various options, I don't plan on reiterating the entire history of the Forest Work Camp, but intend to pretty much focus solely on the offers that we've received. As directed by the board, a request for offers for the Forest Work Camp property was released on May 18th, 2016, with a due date of June 30th. We received 3 offers in alphabetical order. It's Emerald Wellness Clinic, Just in Time, and Veterans Legacy. Emerald Valley Wellness Clinic submitted a monetary offer of $50,000. This offer is contingent upon a land use compatibility statement confirming the allowable use, and also a guarantee of satisfactory water, well, and septic systems. Emerald Valley Wellness Clinic is an existing medical practice based in Cresswell, owned by Dr. Richard Hansen. According to the offer, Dr. Hansen proposes to establish a nonprofit corporation to operate a facility on the property with donations as a potential funding source for the facility. This offer proposes to use the property as a rehabilitation facility that offers horticulture therapy. The proposal describes this as a form of therapy based on connecting humans with the natural environment in which a number of health and rehabilitative services could be implemented. In summary, they are going to provide health classes, lifestyle instruction, medical oversight, meals and nutrition education, and specializes classes in agriculture. And I would like to apologize to the interested respondents that are present here today. I don't go into the entire nuances of each offer, but just for your consideration, a summary of each. Just in Time. Just in Time proposes that the county transfer ownership of the property to them without compensation under the authority of RS 271.3302A, which permits the county to transfer property to a qualifying nonprofit corporation for the purpose of providing social services. Just in Time has agreed to comply with all statutory requirements of the proposed transfer and would accept all ongoing responsibility for the property. They are an existing nonprofit organization registered in the state of Oregon since 2007. This offer proposes providing a long-term residential recovery center for the treatment of substance abuse, specializing in meth addiction. The residential program initial target population would be adult males 18 and older. This proposal will offer residential treatment for adult men 18 and older, classes and workshops supporting treatment and recovery, development of self-sustaining programs including green building, solar, wind, and rain collection, resident job placement programs, on-site mentors, group meetings, counseling services, transitioning skills development for housing, jobs, education, and healthcare, and community outreach. They propose that the funds generated from self-sustaining job programs will be reinvested to support the facility, offsetting the residents' individual costs. They did not ask for any contingencies upon their offer. Veterans Legacy. Veterans Legacy submitted a long-term lease offer. They propose an initial term of 5 years with the possibility of additional subsequent 5-year terms. They are requesting the county waive any lease payment during the first 5-year term, citing the considerable resources they may invest in the site. Veterans Legacy proposes possibly purchasing the site in a later term lease period. They are a recently established nonprofit organization that created specifically in response to the Forest Work Camp property becoming available. They propose to provide rehabilitative services to veterans for PTSD, adjustment disorders, and therapy for drug and alcohol addictions. They outline a format where residents will pay a portion of room and board expenses according to their ability to do so. Those on VA disability, we see a portion of this allocated to Veterans Legacy, while those who do not have an ability to pay will be subsidized. They propose a creation of a membership fee structure as a potential revenue stream, and also development of a memorial program where veteran family members may sponsor various opportunities. They have asked for a mold assessment contingent upon their offer. At this time, the board is being asked to rank the offers and direct staff to commence a purchase, lease, or transfer negotiation. All three offers state their intent to provide rehabilitative and mental health services in some form, and so initially appeared to align with the non-conforming special use associated with the property. There are several policy issues and considerations to be taken into account as the board considers the three offers and any subsequent action. The Forest Work Camp will continue to realize annual operating costs and see continuing deterioration until a suitable and sustainable resolution is reached. Any new use utilizing the verified and expanded non-conforming use approval must be established by March 19th of 2017. And any award of any interest in the property, either through ownership, lease, or transfer, will require an appropriate selection process that meets the county standards for competitiveness and transparency. And so with that, if the board has any questions or concerns.
All right, thank you for the summary. So Commissioner Sorensen?
I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, that all of these proposals are compatible with the regulatory setup for the property?
We believe they initially...
Can you pull that microphone right up there?
We believe that they initially appear to do so. However, we would strongly recommend to any respondent that they would meet with our land management division and go through a land use compatibility process.
Okay, but I don't know quite how to ask this. If they all qualify in terms of being able to locate that type of land use on that property, then how would you sift out one offer better than the other? Or are they just apples, oranges, and kumquats? They're all different.
I would say initially they do appear to all conform to the non-conforming use. They are offering rehabilitative services in some form. So to staff, that initially suggests that they do fit the non-conforming use of the property.
It's not like the original, when this was first put out to the public, we got suggestions that people would like to put a golf course, or they'd like to build a big house or whatever, and it wouldn't fit with the land use.
Correct. The non-conforming use was specifically created for correctional or rehabilitative services. The zoning itself, which is F1, would prohibit the creation of a golf course or private residence, for instance.
Yeah, okay. And have you, aside from reading the material, have you decided, oh, one's better than the other? There's no real recommendation.
At the staff level, we have not ranked the proposals. We look
Okay.
to the board to provide us with directions for our next steps.
Okay. That's what we're trying to do, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, that's on this side of the table. Commissioner Bozevich?
Thank you. So something you said right at the end of your presentation tricked a question for me. You mentioned, however we move forward, it has to be in accordance with all the rules for a competitive bidding process. My understanding was that was what we're actually doing right now. So if we choose to accept one of these proposals, we are fine under state law and disposition, not only for disposition of public property, but as a competitive process.
Yes.
I was looking at the attorney to answer that one, but
Chair Stewart, Commissioner Bozevich, yes, that would be that's the answer. All of these proposals, we would be able to either lease the property under a competitive proposal or sell it or transfer it. It would all be within your authority here.
great, thank you. I just want to make sure that was clear that we have been adhering to that process.
Okay. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. We have three applicants, or 3 respondents, 3 offerers, and that's Emerald Valley Wellness, Just in Time, and Veterans Legacy. Now, the first 2 are offering to transfer ownership, or the transfer of ownership is a part of the first 2.
Yes.
Veterans Legacy, Lane County would retain ownership under subsequent 5-year leases.
That's correct.
So Veterans Legacy is offering, their offer is contingent upon Lane County retaining ownership and they taking over operation through a lease.
That is what they are proposing.
Okay, very good. And
Excuse me, but they have suggested in their proposal that they would be looking at potentially purchasing the property at a later time.
That's, yeah, in your brief, that does say that. You know, all 3 of these, when I lay awake at night dreaming about what this is going to look like in the future, all 3 of them comply with what I have what I personally, and I'm only one person, but what I have in mind is people getting well out in an environment that really is compatible with getting well. And to me, as I look through the 3, I think which is the most viable in terms of sustainability, which seems the most sustainable, to where 15 years from now we'll be looking at it and still seeing the growth, still seeing the organization providing the same kind of benefits that they're offering up front. And I'm going through that process right now. And as we get ready potentially to rank them in an order of 1, 2, and 3, that's probably the main thing I'll be looking at, is which one seems to me the most viable for the long run. Now, in your analysis, any one of the 3 of y'all sitting there, have you thought about viability, and do any of these seem more long-term viable than the others?
Criteria.
Well, I think a consideration that I looked at when looking at the proposals is the ability to sustain themselves. So I out of deference to the difficulty of encapsulating everything an agency is potentially capable of, it's difficult to put that on paper. The first 2, Emerald Valley and Just in Time, have somewhat established themselves. Veterans Legacy is as a relatively newer nonprofit organization. All 3 have suggested that they have funding streams capable of sustaining themselves, but it would be unproven until they were actually able to experience it. So it is hard to tell from a paper proposal actually what is going to be the most viable offer.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may. Regarding transferring of ownership, let's say one of the 2 who are requesting transfer of ownership, let's say that they become insolvent after 3 years or 4 years. What happens then? I mean, at that point, have we washed our hands of the facility completely, and it's a matter of they dealing with whatever receivership is involved?
Depending on, go ahead, Jim.
Chair Stewart, Commissioner Farr, if we sell the property or transfer the ownership of the property, we don't retain any interest in it. And so if they were to become insolvent, for instance, go into bankruptcy, then it would just become part of the bankruptcy estate. One thing I would mention is that, is it part of a negotiation? If you select a proposal, my expectation would be part of the negotiation would be finding out the viability. We have 3 proposals. One from the first proposal is from an individual who proposes to create a nonprofit, and if you were to want to do that, but you wanted it to be a nonprofit, part of the negotiation would be making certain that the nonprofit was created and had adequate resources to take this on. And we would be doing that with, I think, any of the, whichever vendor you think would be ranked best, is that part of the negotiation is making sure that the ducks are in a row so that it can move forward. And we're not back here again. Brian's saying amen. That we're not back here again in 3 or 5 years discussing the same thing.
Okay, so there are 2 things to consider here. One is just the effect on the county itself regarding the property just just getting rid of our obligation of our liability on the property. And the second is the service that's going to be provided for the long run. And one of them is directly, probably monetarily beneficial to the county, and the other one is more beneficial to the people that we as a county serve. And that's something that has to be juggled out a little bit. Are we simply in it to get out from underneath the property, or are we trying to provide something that's not been provided before on an ongoing basis? And for me, that's another part of the consideration is as I look at the proposals, which ones do I believe can do the job that they say that they're going to do for the long haul, and not just return to fallow ground, basically, return to forest regrowing over old buildings. So that's kind of juggling that in my mind. And, quite frankly, I think there's a higher value in serving people for the long run than the short-term monetary offset that may be acquired by either selling the property or just divesting ourselves of the property. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bozovich?
So a question, I've got a couple things. First, I want to mention and declare, I have a relationship with one of the people involved in one of the proposers, and I want to make sure that's public, that Mark Oberle and I worked together at eWeb. Been a while. But I do know Mark, and I just want to make that does not, I don't believe that will influence my decision one way or the other, but I want to make sure it's public, that everybody knows that I do know one of the folks on the team of one of the proposers, and just want to make sure that's out in the open. The question I want to make clear is, was in our request for proposals and that we put out there, was ability to sustain your organization financially a requested criteria for review of the proposals?
We did have that. We did have some verbiage in our request document that they would provide some financial information about their organization and the ability to sustain their endeavor.
So that is a criteria we can look at. I just want to make sure that's clear, that we actually had that as part of the proposals, because I don't want to have us look at something that we didn't ask for, or make guesses as to people's financial ability to sustain themselves.
Chair Stewart, Commissioner Bozovich, I believe that what we did was we said that once the commissioners had, that we had the right to request that information following submission of the proposals, rather than asking it to be submitted with the proposals. And that was true for a couple of reasons. One, it's a little hard to do. Two, it's not subject to public disclosure. So we didn't ask for it with the proposals. We could ask for that now.
Okay. Great. I just wanted to clarify that. So we don't really have that information at hand to make that kind of determination in our ranking. So we should assume, I guess, that they're equal under that footing, because we have no evidence to make an assumption in any direction that one organization is more viable financially than another. As far as long-term health of the organization, that leads me to a comment here. Transferring the property, really, at that point, we don't have an interest in that. It's not a concern of ours. If we're going to lease the property, then we're involved in a contractual relationship with that organization. Their ability to keep up with their end of the contract makes a big difference. As I look at this, and having been a tour guide for Department of Corrections, the Oregon Department of Forestry, and I can't tell you how many other people I've taken out there over the years trying to figure out how we could get this facility utilized, I'm happy we have 3 organizations that want to utilize it. But I can't envision, contrary to the Register Guard's editorial, a future use that Lane County will have for that property. And as I look at this, as I'm thinking about being a good steward of the citizens' resources, I'm leaning more towards a transfer rather than a lease, because I don't care, even if we're, zero, they assume some of the operational costs and all that stuff, and we're doing it, as a lease agreement. Supposedly we're out of our $250,000 a year just to keep placing mothballs. We're saving that money. We're still a landlord. And anyone that's been a landlord, it ain't free. There's going to be something that gets discovered that they want fixed, or there's going to be some issue. I don't care. Being a landlord is not free. And I'm much more inclined to look at the two offers that are transfers, from my point of view, as trying to be a good steward of the county's resources. And I'm much more inclined to look at the one that doesn't have the number of contingencies on it, all things being equal. If I'm looking at this, we've got an asset that has minimal value to us. We've, seen the $75,000 estimates of the value of the property, that we're spending $250,000 to keep in mothballs. I just assume, as quickly as possible, execute a transfer and get it off of our books. It has almost no value to us. In fact, it's got negative value to the county. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, is just looking at it purely from a property asset owner and how I want to deal with this, and declaring all things equal. All three organizations are proposing to do great work in our community. I have to make the assumption that all three are viable organizations at this point in time. Looking at it for me is, let's get the property transferred, and contingencies, lead to, anyone that's been into real estate knows you have an offer with a bunch of contingency, one that doesn't have contingencies. Even if this one's offering a little bit more money, usually the one without contingencies is the one to go with, because you don't lose the sale partway through because the contingency fell apart. And that's kind of where I'm looking at it. So if I was going to rank, it'd be Just in Time number 1, Emerald number 2, and Veterans Legacy number 3. Mostly just trying to do good asset management for the county.
Thank you. So I guess I have at least a question, and I was thinking about it before Commissioner Bozovich brought it up. So with the lease, what type of responsibility would the county have? Would we need to carry an additional liability policy on the property? What might be additional costs that might be incurred by the county with the lease?
There'd certainly be a number of, Chair Stewart, Commissioners, there'd certainly be a number of additional considerations. Our property management folks are certainly well-versed in the number of properties we lease out. A lot of times there's indemnification and insurance requirements associated with that, so that could be a challenge for a kind of infant organization that's coming on board. But I certainly wouldn't expect us to compromise on any of those requirements to make sure that the liability of the county is limited. One of the points I guess I'll make is part of what we try to do is try to expand the goalposts as much as possible with the request for offers, and try to set the bar as reasonably as possible. And the risk you run when you do that is you end up getting the apples, oranges, and bananas all coming in. You're trying to compare them together, but that was intentional, and that now it does create a challenge for the board as you try to consider not only the organization but the terms under which they offered. From staff's perspective, moving forward, if there's a form of agreement that appeals to the board, separate from the organizations themselves, that could create maybe an alternate avenue with regard to direction that we haven't necessarily included in this board order, in terms of if there's a preferred form of agreement that we would then discuss with the different organizations. I would hate, I'd be concerned about endorsing, say, a transfer and not giving other organizations that may have offered under a different arrangement, who may be willing to entertain a transfer, an opportunity not to discuss that with us, or deny them an opportunity to discuss that with us. So I just want to share that as well.
Okay, so short answer to my question was that it sounds like there would be some potential financial, or if we entertain a lease, the county might have some financial costs.
Yeah, I try to filter
Purposes or something.
my feedback because we do administer a number of these leases, and it's possible, but there is an ongoing cost to staff. Staff and administer those leases, as well as when a number of items come up that aren't necessarily contemplated by the lease that we work through with those lessees. So, yeah, there'd certainly be a lot more of an ongoing burden than with a transfer.
Okay, so I'm trying to flesh this out just a little bit more. So, this is a little bit different. My experience is with a park in Cottage Grove, and I have a relationship with my nonprofit that's dealing with the city of Cottage Grove, and Cottage Grove carries the liability for the use of the park, and it's rolled into their ultimate umbrella, and they're covered. And it's a park, and it's got recreation immunity, lots of different pieces. Now, this is not a park, and there's going to be a lease here. Currently, I would assume it's covered under the county's asset liability, probably at a cost or not? Yes? There's a cost to having that property on our
Yeah,
insurance?
absolutely.
Okay, so do we know, we're probably going to have to continue that, right? So there's going to be, I'm trying to flesh out that if we're going to entertain a lease, we're going to have some additional costs. We've got a proposal for a lease that says they don't want to pay anything for 5 years. And so my second question would be, has there been any mention, and maybe I missed it in the proposal because there's lots of different numbers here. Is there a potential, what might a lease look like payment 5 years from now?
I'll take my third swing. Hopefully I don't strike out this time. We did have a discussion about this at Facilities Committee because of the implications of a lease and the difference between that and ownership. And what we've included in your draft board order is language related to if we were to enter into any form of agreement that the ongoing costs to the county, there would be no ongoing costs to the county. That's more or less setting us up for a negotiation process where we would try to achieve that with a lease agreement.
Okay.
That being said, there's inevitably staff time and costs associated with just administering the agreement, which is what I was referencing. But the intent would be that when it comes to utility bills, insurance considerations, liability, that those costs, the costs associated with addressing those would be on the lessee, not the county.
Okay. Thank you. Perfect. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So has each of the three folks who are interested in this, have they actually taken a tour of the facility?
Yes, we had a series of mandatory site visits where we asked in our proposal document that they must attend at least one, which they all complied with. Some of the entities actually came to more than one, which they were entirely welcome to. We also tried to accommodate those that were interested in visiting the site again after those mandatory site visits.
And they're still interested?
They are still interested. I would like to say that all three respondents are present here today.
I have a different background in this because I've actually been involved in building 300, a group of 300 apartments, managing a mobile home park and a shopping center. And I will tell you, in a heartbeat, I would have raised that in a minute. The only value is the land. That's why I'm shocked. I'm surprised that there's even interest in it. But if there is, great. And frankly, I think our best bet is just to somehow, I would not support a lease at all. And that's just where I'm at. I just wouldn't. I'd rather the county be completely free of that. I'd be much more interested in putting forth a sale or something of that sort where and having something built in a contingency so it doesn't fall back to the county. I don't know I don't know or where the funding streams come from or anything else of these three entities. I'm guessing based on the information and your own analysis and I guess the interviewing of each that there's funding streams involved, and that's fine. But my personal feeling is that whomever's the number one here is that they'll purchase it, and then we walk away, we're done, and that's just really where I'm thinking right now. I mean, our number one priority is just trying to be stewards of the of county property, and I'm not on a board of each of these entities. I don't know if anybody else is, or whatever the case may be. They will have their own boards, and that'll be their fiduciary responsibility, not mine. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments? So for, Mr. Cheney?
I would like to correct something I said earlier. I made it all the way to, August this year without making a mistake. No. Actually, we asked for a certain amount of financial information, but we got less than we expected on each of the organizations. So one thing that you might include in a motion might be that we, before beginning negotiations, that we ensure that all parties can demonstrate adequate resources for what their proposal is in a more formal form prior to starting negotiations, and and direct the staff to evaluate that prior to beginning negotiations. You can rank them, but if the top ranked one, simply the staff finds that they don't have adequate financial resources, we would go to the next.
So just to clarify, so what we're asking, if we're taking what you just said and we put it into a motion, are we asking them to demonstrate their ability to be successful as an organization? Or are we asking, we're asking, somebody would like the property just gifted, so that should be a pretty easy demonstration. There's no money. One is offering compensation, so let me follow. In my understanding, where you probably would like to get demonstration of ability on the overall concept of what's being proposed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and if I may quote from what Betty had put in the RFP, which we did not, or RFQ, which we did not get all of from anyone. Evidence of ability to finance the proposed use was letters of interest or commitment from equity sources and lenders, a current or proposed operating budget, financial statements for the past 3 years, if requested by county following. And so we had some, but we got some letters of support, we got some of this, but in terms of getting all those things, we didn't get them from any of them. Not that that's makes them invalid, but we didn't get a complete set. But those would be the kind of pieces of information that would be evaluated.
Commissioner Larkin.
I was just going to say, thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like to me just standard practice. I mean, anytime you have a real estate transaction, it's just standard practice. Is that what you're suggesting? The same way that a private sector would, when we're going to a lending institution, there's an expectation of, and I'm not going to go through the expectation, but there's a fairly standard practice on what the lending institution would recommend and would say, this is what we need in order to further go down this road. Is that what your suggestion?
I should look at Betty here, but yes, I think that before the staff would begin negotiating the specifics of a lease with any party, that party would have to provide adequate information that would meet your standard that you were saying for a real estate, for any other real estate deal, that would give confidence that it would go, that the contract would be carried through on.
Okay. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Listening to my fellow commissioners speak, there are a couple who seem pretty adamant that a lease is not what they're interested in, that transfer of ownership is seems to be the bottom line, which in their minds would rule out, based on what we have so far, would rule out Veterans Legacy. Now, as I look at the services provided, I'm not interested in ruling out Veterans Legacy. So that being said, Brian earlier said that if potentially a renegotiation regarding the ownership may be a part of a discussion down the road. So to place Veterans Legacy on the same playing field as the other two, I'm not going to ask you to speculate as to whether or not they'd be interested in transfer of ownership, but Just in Time's offering nothing, $0, and Emerald Valley is offering $50,000, which is really, in the grand scheme of things, basically nothing. So in your estimation, if we were to move forward continue with all three, even though two commissioners over here have said no on the lease, giving Veterans Legacy the option of contemplating a transfer of ownership, is that something that we could do moving forward? Jim, I guess I'm asking that of you.
Chair Stewart, Commissioner Farr, I'm not sure I I'd have to go back, read exactly what we said. I'm not sure I can answer that question right at the moment.
Because I look at the three proposals, and once again, all three are good proposals, and all three are offering a type of service that I hope and anticipate and hope that we could do this for the long term, that we can continue to provide these services. I wish we could afford to do it as a county. I wish Lane County could afford to provide these services. But we have three groups who are offering to do the services that really we count on in Lane County from nonprofits. We have two actual 501c3s. One potentially is going to be a 501c3. Ranking them in an order, based taking away the lease versus transfer of ownership issue, I would rank them Veterans Legacy, Just in Time, and Emerald Valley Wellness Clinic, based upon the mission that they're proposing and based upon the what I would anticipate the long-term result being. I'm not particularly interested in turning the property over to somebody just to let it go into nothing, go back to forest. That's not a bad thing. Going back to forest certainly isn't a bad thing, but so we have an opportunity here, and I would hate to squander an opportunity to provide a service that simply is not being provided. And if we don't find a way to provide the service through one of these three offers, that it'll never be provided in the county. And so I think we have an opportunity that I hope that we're not going to squander. And so as we move forward, offering the options to keep three offers on the table, basically, if leasing is not going to be considered by this board, and certainly 40% of it, the board has stated that that's not an option at this point in time. So I'm interested in making certain that we continue to move forward. That being said, I've given you my ranking: Veterans Legacy, Just in Time, and Emerald Valley Wellness Clinic.
Commissioner Sorensen.
I just want to say, I just want to say, one of the things that concerns me is whether we got anyone that wants to buy it straight out. Do we get?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's one proposal.
Okay.
Emerald Valley Wellness proposal.
There's one proposal
Right.
for buying it straight out, and
Right.
one, we give it to them,
Right,
and one, they lease it from us.
right.
Okay. It seems like if we were going down the route of, we don't know what the public need will be on this property for 100 years or 50 years or 25 years, and we don't really think it's reasonable for someone to propose a lease of that period of time. But if we were to think about the short-term problem we have, which is that there's a resource that's declining in value, and we have to spend money to maintain it, and it's still probably going down in value. But if we could satisfy an important community need by leasing the property, and the board could come to some agreement that we'd really like to see some proposals for a lease in a time period that a nonprofit might have a planning horizon for, maybe 10 years. That'd be a pretty long planning horizon for a lot of nonprofits. But if we had a lease for that period of time, then we begin getting what I think the commissioners on the board who are more inclined to want to sell it, and that is, well, we don't really want to have to manage this, and on their end of things, if there's costs associated with us leasing it, those costs should be factored into the cost of the lease. And that if the nonprofit, looking at it from their point of view, if they could make a commitment for what might be considered a long period of time, then they would have an idea of just how much money they'd have to raise and how fast they'd have to raise it. And we could tailor our offer to meet the specifics of what is right there right now. So I would be more inclined to say, well, let's try, since there wasn't any substantial offer to buy it, why don't we tailor an announcement for a lease, and then all of the groups that might have bid or submitted things last time, they could get a better idea of what we're looking for. And And that would be that they maintain the site, that they invest in it as they choose. They pay us for the cost of whatever supervision we could cost out. And maybe we can give them favorable terms in terms of the upfront costs, being that we would take our money later in the transaction rather than earlier in the transaction, making it easier for them. And that way, we're not just getting rid of a community resource that is owned by the people of the county, and we're getting some good nonprofit to do something worthwhile. And we're also addressing our own need to manage our property better than maybe it has been managed in the last few years. So that would be my direction. I don't see selling it because we had one offer that's a really low amount of money. I don't see that as in the public interest, selling it just because somebody wanted to buy it. I do see the future need that we can't yet anticipate, but just hypothetically, what if the United States in 10 years decided that really we needed a lot more services for people with mental problems or people that were returning veterans, and that we really should invest in that, and counties would be eligible for that kind of funding. Well, that doesn't really exist now, at least in my view, but it could exist, and why would we want to give up that opportunity on the long term when we could do something on the short term that deals with the current problem, which is the declining value of the property, and nonprofits in our community that are willing to take the risk to try to improve life for people in the county. So that's my perspective. And I wonder, I don't know that we're going to be able to really do this in this setting. And I'm wondering, since we're talking about a lease or sale of property, whether it's really better for a executive session where we can talk about this quality of the quality of the information we've received.
We could propose that the board consider directing staff to go back to the three entities and interviewing them, look at maybe more narrowed criteria for more defined terms. That is a possibility that staff could take.
Okay.
Staff understands this is a very difficult decision. We don't envy you the process that you're having to go through to come up with a decision and a ranking.
Well, we asked for it. I'm sitting here thinking about this. We tried to present an RFP that would give us the most options and the most available proposals, and so with that, we don't have a lot of set criteria. I mean, we said, I do remember the conversation when we talked about, all types of offers, and there was, certain members that expressed that they felt it was just good to sell it outright. There was others that mentioned that, maybe leases and different things. So we asked for it, and so we just have to figure out how we're going to get through this. So I'll go to Commissioner Bozovich.
Yeah. First, I want to clarify a couple things. One, Commissioner Lyken and I both stated categorically when you guys chose to include leasing that we didn't think we should be including that in the RFP. Mm-hmm. We really weren't interested in a lease then, so the fact that we're not still interested in it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Second, there were two offers to purchase this property, not one. I want to make that clear. Just in time, just as zero compensation dollar-wise. Emerald has chosen to offer $50,000, but they have contingencies of having to have working systems, which could cost us more than $50,000 to repair. We have no idea because we haven't done that. So we do have two offers that transfer the property. And one of the things, you can do a $0 transfer because it is to a nonprofit under state law from a governmental organization to a nonprofit without tax implications and all that. That's the ORS references in there. But, it's so what we're looking at is, if we want to go back and reopen the RFP and say, we're going to only look at transfers, and we want folks to give us proposals for transfers, and then, Veterans Legacy and whoever else might want to get involved in making an offer purely for a transfer. That's one option we can do, because I don't think it's easy for us to go back and after the deadline say, by the way, Veterans Legacy, we want you to look at, would you be willing to make an offer that's a transfer versus a lease? And for those that don't think as a landlord that a lease can cost you money, I have 2 words to remind the board of many an executive session and costs we had. Gary Conley.
Well, that was a little different situation, but I appreciate the reminder. Commissioner Farr.
I'm not ill opposed to talking about this in an executive session where we can lay a few more things on the table, as long as we come out with a, with whatever decision. We don't make a decision in executive session. And, triple net leasing, you're all familiar with that. I don't know if government entities engage in triple net leasing, but there's really no liability to the leaseor, the person doing the leasing. That is the owner of the property. Sorry. So, there are ways to lease where there is no net liability to the owner of the property. So I've been involved in triple net leasing, and it doesn't seem fair to the person leasing the property, quite frankly, but that's just my own personal opinion about it. But, that being said, I don't know for a fact, and this is something that we could maybe discuss, I don't know for a fact that the Veterans Legacy knew that paying nothing for the property was an option. The only, we're talking about a transfer of ownership, that actually an upfront cost, it may be all they thought that they could do. So I'm in favor of talking a little bit more in detail. Once again, I would like to see something that is going to be viable for the long term. I'd like to see a service being provided that otherwise isn't going to get provided. And as I look through these, I've not had enough time to really analyze which one seems more viable to me. If the rest of the board is interested in that, I would like to have an executive session to talk more in detail about it. But we don't, Ms. Michoud, we don't have a lot of time here, do we? We've got to make this happen pretty quickly.
To satisfy the non-conforming use deadline, the timing is somewhat urgent.
Yeah. So if we ask you to prepare for an executive session, it would have to be something that would happen, that it would need to happen in the next week or 2 weeks at the most. And any further discussion has got to be fast-lined or fast-tracked so we can have the discussion and make a decision.
I believe that to be true.
Okay. And once again, I'm not interested in just seeing this opportunity get squandered, an opportunity to provide service to people who otherwise wouldn't get the service.
Mr. Larkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we were to, wouldn't we have to potentially reopen this then up for bid if we were to change, in a sense, change the rules for the other organization who was just looking at this, specifically the lease?
I guess I would defer to Jim on that, but I believe that to be true, that if you're changing the scope of your initial request somehow, where you're saying, well, now we're thinking about doing something else, I would think that you would need to open that back up. Unless there is a way we could confine it to the 3 offers that we have now.
Yes, Chair Stewart, we did include the possibility of transfers as one of the criteria that could be in an offer for us transfer under Chapter 271 or 275 of the Oregon Revised Statutes. So that was something we did put out there. It's just that one vendor took advantage of looking at their proposal that way. One vendor offered cash, and one vendor offered a lease. So, as I think Commissioner Sorensen said, it's apples, oranges, and kumquats is what you have here, and that's a hard decision to make.
So we would not have to reopen the bid?
I'm sorry. I'll take my second swing at that. No, we would have, if we were going to say, no, we're only going to consider proposals for transfer or sale and not for lease, then what we would have to do is reject the proposals that we've received and ask for new proposals.
Yeah. The other thing, and this is my thought on the lease piece. If this was more of an urban setting, I might be a little bit more open to it. The challenge is, name me a comp There are no comps to this facility out in, I mean, how can you, there are none. I have no idea where they would be, not in the state of Oregon. Maybe they are. I have no idea. And so that's the challenge I have with the lease out in this particular area is that there's no comps. Well, in an urban area, you may have comps involved where you can make that decision a little bit easier if you want to go down the area of a lease. And so anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. But I appreciate that response, Jim. I just that's the piece I think we have to be careful on. If there's interest here and allowing all to have more of a fair shake, then I think we have no choice but to open this back up. So appreciate it. Thank you.
I would also like to remind the board that if we begin negotiations with the entity, there's no guarantee that that will come to fruition. So depending on how long that takes, we may go to your next ranking, and again, that may not come to fruition. So we have no idea at this point how those negotiations would go. They all would take time.
Okay. So I'm not seeing Mr. Mokaiski.
Well, just Mr. Craner maybe wants to add, but maybe sensing where it seems the board is at, I think what would be helpful for us at the very least, understanding that we have a tight time frame here, 6-7 months, till we hit that March 17 deadline. There's also, if we're going to negotiate, we need a period of time to actually negotiate with one or with one of these entities. And it sounds like there's a desire among the board to get some additional information before you make a decision. So I think what would be helpful for us is to understand what piece of information you would like to get, whether that's financial information or additional information about services, operations, terms of lease or purchase. And then we can try to do that within as relatively short a period of time as possible. I don't think a couple weeks is doable. I would hope maybe within a month or 6 weeks we could gather that information, have those discussions, analyze that, and then bring that forward to the board. So that, I know Mr. Craner wants to say something, but I think we could use some direction from the board on where you would like us to go next.
Yeah, and that's great. And to assist you in helping provide that direction, I'm sitting here trying to, I think the offers would appreciate, and certainly the board would appreciate if the criteria that you were evaluating was a lot more consistent and narrowed for the offers. So in an attempt to kind of get some consistency across the offers. I'm sitting here trying to work through the reconciliation of the desire to sell versus a lease. In a lot of ways, I see the appeal of the lease being that in ways the county can help dictate the use, and if that use isn't successful, that then the county has an opportunity to reassume the property and pursue other options. I believe there are some ways, some mechanisms that we can include in a sale to help fulfill those desires and potentially make that appeal to a majority of the board. I think there's some precedent at the county for sales with some sort of use that's dictated that if it doesn't happen, that gets reverted back to the county. That's something we can explore if there's a majority of the board that would like us to narrow it to that sort of term for the offers to do an amended response to, or to any additional offers as well.
Okay, well then I just respond to that. You won't know that until the negotiating, because hypothetically, if we entertain just an outright gift to just in time, and then we have some criteria attached to the gift, like you said, maybe a reversion, or they can't use it to secure additional funds, then that might be what they were trying to figure out, possibly how to capitalize and be able to do repairs and get to operating. So that might actually cause a problem with dealing with them. I'm just hypothetical. For me, this one's a really challenging item here. Because I go out there and I've seen the improvements, and I understand that there's a lot of need to fix it up, and to me it's hard to say, okay, it's worth really nothing, is what in some aspects this is what's been confirmed again. We've won, this is the second time that we've done an RFP and we didn't receive much different as far as offers than what we have. So when I tell myself that, well, there's 105 acres there and it's timberland and it's worth, on the assessment rolls and comps are worth, let's just say last year's 170 or $1,700 an acre was last year's average sale for F1 land that was bare. There's $183,000. Then you got to address the liability that sits there and how you're going to deal with that. So, bringing myself to say that piece of property doesn't have any value is hard for me to get to. And then on the next piece is when I look at what was being proposed, I was, as somebody who reviews a lot of grants and goes through the process, I would say that the veterans offer, Veterans Legacy, they did a pretty detailed application, even though, maybe there's some areas that lacked information, but really support letters and how they're going to move forward and, kind of a mechanism how they're going to be successful. There was a lot more information to lead me to believe that one, I feel, even though we're being asked to not charge a lease for 5 years, is appealing to me from a standpoint of what's being presented to me up front. And then in listening to my colleagues, I certainly understand the challenges with contingencies on an offer. I mean, we could go down the road and they deal with land management and, hypothetically 4 a month and a half from now, they deem that what they want to do is not going to work with the planning decision, and so then then their offer's dead, and we're back to, how do we pick up? And we've lost a certain amount of time for the current folks to get established and operating at some level by March 19th. So, that being said, if I was to rank on the information that's giving, I'm leaning to putting the Veterans Legacy first, then Just in Time, and then the wellness offer is third. So I'm not helping us get to yes on this matter at this point.
Sure.
Mr. Lykin.
Just for the record, I would rank them Just in Time, followed by Emerald, and then Veterans Legacy. And frankly, the Just in Time, I'm not viewing as a gift. I'm just viewing that as a smart bid because, first of all, we have no idea how much money it's going to cost. It's going to take to actually rehabilitate the property there. Again, it's the land. The land is the value. Correct me. The assessed value was somewhere around $70,000. Was that right? 70, maybe 100,000 tops.
Yeah, it's somewhat dated at this point, but that was the formal appraisal came in about $70,000. And then my predecessor also had a bid to remove the improvements, and that came in at roughly $70,000. So.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. That's my thought. Thank you.
Other comments? I mean, I've heard it suggested possibly a executive session for further discussion. I don't know. And at this point, I don't know that we're Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, if I'm trying to think of this, in the sense that I've bought property, I have leased property, I've sold property, I bought more property, I leased that property. Sometimes I made really good money doing that. Other times, as I believe Commissioner Lykin pointed out, there's costs associated with owning property. So it doesn't always work out for the way you thought it would or hoped it would. So I get the idea that it's easier just to wash your hands of it and say, well, let's just sell this thing. And since somebody offered to pay X dollars, let's just sell the property. We avoid the costs associated with the mothballing. We avoid, with all due respect to my colleagues, the lawyers, we don't have to pay them anymore. We're done, and we move on to other things. But I'm thinking of this in maybe a broader way, and that is, right now, we have people that want to use this facility. Now, in the future, we may want to use it. or we may want to use it for what we used to have it for, the Forest Work Camp, or we might want to use it for other corrections facilities in the state that might be interested down the road, but they're not now. So I kind of get the idea that we ought to be focused on getting the word out that if groups, nonprofit groups, want to lease this facility, then we want to hear from them. Now, I get it that some people on the board are saying, well, look, we tried that in an informal way. We've tried it now in a formal way. It's not coming back the way we want, so we need to sell it. I'm just saying, is it really worth, in the long term, is it really worth making a decision about the ownership of the Forest Work Camp that's been there for so long based on today's market and what we have? So this is why I lean more to, let's get the word out beyond, what we've done, and make very clear what we want, which is, in my view, a lease proposal. And the group's got to have the standing and backing to do it. They got to tell us what they're going to do. And that's what we're interested in. We're interested in something that's going to benefit the community, benefit Lane County. So anyway, I don't know if that adds to it, but I'll just offer that I don't think selling it is the proper way to go.
Okay. Commissioner Parr?
Thank you, and thanks. Commissioner Sorensen gave me a little bit of clarity on that. I'm certainly not ill opposed to leasing, and what the type of lease of Veterans Legacy is proposing, 5 years with no payment or being forgiven for the lease. I would guess that in the negotiation, any cost to maintain the lease would be, we could negotiate that be borne by Veterans Legacy, that there'd be no net cost to the county to maintain the lease. The statement's been made that it's not free to lease or it's not free to rent property. So I would suspect that is a part of could be a part of the negotiation with the potential leaser. I also like the idea of not losing the ownership of the property. That sometime down the road things may change. Maybe that's not likely, but sometime down the road things may change, and by allowing Veterans Legacy to go forward with, for instance, Veterans Legacy on a lease to go forward with what they're proposing, gives us an opportunity to provide a service at really no net cost to the county, and to really keep an eye on it for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, or sometime during the 5 years, Veterans Legacy may be inclined to say, yes, we'd like to go ahead and buy the property. That's, a leaser can always come back and say, can we buy the property that we're currently leasing from you? So while Commissioner Sorensen gave me a little bit of clarity, I'm not certain that I was able to articulate the clarity that he gave me. But at this point in time, I'd like to have an executive session to talk about the very specifics of the potential of leasing and the type of negotiation that can happen during the lease. And it seems to me that in a lease process, we could negotiate something that's quite neutral to the county in terms of cost. So based on that, Mr. Chair, I would like to propose that we schedule an executive session to talk very specifically about these proposals, and at the end of the executive session be prepared to come out and make a recommendation as to which one we would prefer to go down the road with.
Mr. Mokrycki?
Sure. So we can schedule an executive session fairly easily. We could do that for next week. The question is if you feel you need additional information for that to make a decision, to review and then be able to make a decision when you come out of that executive session, particularly to rank, or do you just want an opportunity to further review what's already been submitted, have that conversation in executive session with what we already have, and then come out and make a decision?
Mr. Mokrycki and Mr. Chair, I don't believe we need more information before the executive session. I think a part of that would be what type of negotiation would the lease negotiation involve. And if during the executive session it's determined that the types of things we need to see to feel comfortable that there's no net loss to the county are not going to be there, then maybe so be it. The lease option goes off the table. But I think we could talk since it is a real estate transfer, it is real estate information, we could talk very frankly about instincts, gut feelings, maybe, I don't know, and but very specifically about what we would like to see in a lease negotiation. Because what I'm seeing here in this 3 paragraphs, I mean, that's not a lease negotiation. That's just kind of a vague concept. That Jim, you negotiate leases and contracts all the time. You know that a lot of things are going to be put into a contract that can protect the person who is actually the ownership property, the ownership entity. So that's what I'd like to see. Just let's talk about the potential of a lease. Let's talk about how Lane County could be held harmless throughout a lease process, and make sure that we can move forward with something without just a brief discussion of 90 minutes in front of, sitting up here on a podium where we can't even look at each other's faces and have a discussion.
Okay, so I don't think we're going to get to a clear direction to staff today. So I'd like to entertain us scheduling this for executive session next Tuesday. We have a fairly light agenda, so I'm sure that we can fit it in fairly, accommodate it, and then we'll be able to come out and possibly give direction to staff on the 3 proposals. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry we weren't able to get to a conclusion today.
Just out of clarity, between now and next Tuesday, should we avoid talking to any of the applicants? Or is it okay to talk to the applicants and gather more personal information regarding them?
I would advise against speaking with the applicants in the period in between.
I
should
hear that out
mention
loud. Thank you.
that there is a specific exception under the Public Meetings Law for executive sessions to discuss the factors relating to real estate transactions. And so that's,
okay.
But again, we can't progress to a decision in there.
That's what I expected. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's go back and pick up a couple items that we skipped over this morning. I'd like to move to county administration announcements. Mr. Mokajewski.
Mr. Chair, I will happily defer to next week since we do have a lighter agenda. If you give me a few more minutes next week, since we have exec session today and items to get through, I'm happy to defer. I don't have anything critical for today, just some updates.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll go to Commissioner's business, and the first is announcements. We have announcements. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we're under business right now. I'd just like to mention that yesterday we were began a discussion with the City of Eugene, with the courts, and with staff and elected officials regarding a process for the placement of facilities downtown. It was called a joint task force meeting, and it's okay to say who was in the meeting. It was Mayor Piercy and Councilors Poling and Pryor, as well as Commissioner Stewart and I, as well as Judge Rasmussen, and staff from the county, staff from the city. Ms. Rambo could not be there as staff from the court. But what's being proposed is a process that would have a robust series of meetings of that smaller group, with at least 3 joint elected officials meetings between now and November 15th, which is the deadline for this group's recommendations to their respective boards. It's been pointed out that this is not a decision-making group by any stretch of the imagination. It's just just vetting the possibilities and making recommendations through a series of joint elected officials meetings to the other 2 entities, to the City Council and the County Commission. I think things went pretty well. Mr. Craner was there, kind of facilitated the meeting and ran us through the agenda, and proposed, once again, a fairly robust series of meetings, including at least 3 JEO meetings between now and November 15th.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just want to mention that last weekend, so it wouldn't be future, but on Saturday, the 13th, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, Saturday the 13th, today being Tuesday the 16th, so a few days ago, was the annual Lane County Pride Day. That is the celebration of the contributions of gay and lesbians in Lane County. And I was, in the past, there's been resolutions presented by City of Eugene, and this year the City of Springfield, Mayor Lundberg and Mayor Piercy presented resolutions in support of Pride Day, and Governor Brown, who was not present, but a representative read a resolution from the governor. And normally the City of Eugene Police are there, and they were again this year, but this year, Lane County Health and Human Services and the Lane County Sheriff's Office were both part of Pride Day, and they had booths out there, and it was at Alton Baker Park. Several thousand people attended. I just commend this to folks here at the county to thank the Sheriff's Office and Department of Health and Human Services for having informational booth available to the public attending, and also to thank the governor and the two mayors for their proclamations.
Commissioner Bozovich?
So I just want to note that Chair Stewart and I were able to attend the First Friday Communities of Color event last week, and it was a really great event, and kind of had a Oriental food theme, trying to support some of the businesses that have been vandalized recently here in Eugene. And it was a really great event, and I got to stand there next to Chief Kearns and serve salad together, so it was a lot of fun.
Commissioner Lycan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think Steve touched on it briefly, so I'll just touch on it very briefly as well, and that is, so tentatively, it looks like we may have finally a new CEO, executive director, whatever the title is going to be of the new Eugene, what is it? Greater Eugene Inc. Thank you. What'd you call it?
Grink.
Yeah. So no acronyms though, but Greater Eugene Inc. And this is the basically the reboot of the Lane Metro partnership in a sense. And so he's from out of state, and so doesn't really. Admittedly, doesn't he used to run track, so he's very familiar with University of Oregon. I was impressed with that, and but out of the folks that we had the opportunity to interview, was clearly I think the number one choice, and anyway, so looking forward to bringing him on board, and I think his start date is sometime in October, isn't it? Yeah, great, thank you.
So I had a couple announcements, and I wanted to follow up on Mr. Russell's report on Wildwood Falls. I just wanted to share how thankful I am that the young Eagle Scout gentleman that's actually Boy Scout that's trying to earn his Eagle Scout took this on as a project, because as each of you know, I think it was last year we had a couple unfortunate accidents up there where we lost a couple lives last year alone, and in my lifespan I can remember years where we've lost. It seems like there for a while it was once a year, but it's not that many. But I really appreciate Parks and Legal Counsel's effort to try to find a way for us to elevate the level of awareness of the potential dangers that exist. And I felt that this was could be a very impactful way for folks that use that site to enjoy and recreate, to just think that maybe we should take a little bit of extra caution when we're here, and not end up with being a statistic or a casualty on that list. So I want to thank staff for finding a solution, and I hope that it helps us reduce the number of casualties that we see at that site in the future. The second is that on Friday we had somewhat of an emergency LCOG meeting, executive board, and the reason for that meeting was to give approval to LCOG staff to kind of be the lead on this middle mile fiber and internet service provision in Eugene and Lane County. And it's exciting to see where that's at, and with partnerships with eWeb and City of Eugene and others. Lane County might be a partnership at some point, and LCOG itself. And one of the things that was really neat or interesting that I learned was that one of the providers that wants to take advantage of this new infrastructure is wanting to deploy essentially high-speed Wi-Fi internet service, starting with Westford, Oregon, of all places, 340 people. And what's neat is that that's their first project, and they're going to use it as I think a learning ground to understand the new technology that's coming about in regards to wireless internet service provision in a cloud. And if this rolls out the way they expect, they'll be able to accomplish it in the next 90 days. And the citizens of Westford can acquire internet speed service at 100 megabytes per second for $100 a month, 50 megabytes per second for $50 a month. So that's only about 50 times greater than the service I'm getting right now at my house, and I'm paying more money. So I'm hoping that this technology actually shows that it's realistic, and I think it'll be really beneficial for us rural commissioners, as I'm sure that Commissioner Bozovich gets the same calls I do in regards to people really needing that higher speed service so that they can actually operate their business from home. So I'm cautiously optimistic and hopeful that this is going to open the doors, that folks are going to be able to realistically work from home and acquire greatly enhanced speeds to their internet service to all citizens. So exciting, and I'll try to keep you up to date as that moves forward. Other announcements? Okay. I'd like to move to agenda team requests. And as chair, I have one request that I want to throw out there. As you might remember, back in, I believe it was June, we received, or the administration received a report from our elected officials compensation board. And they have made some recommendations. There was recommendations to consider increase of compensation to the sheriff, increase compensation to the justice judge, or justice court judge, justice peace, sorry, and then there was recommendation for the Board of Commissioners. So my request to you, and I have Ms. Moody here, because if the board wants to entertain a conversation in an agenda item for the Board of Commissioners, then we will also need to coordinate a meeting with the Budget Committee under our rules that we follow. And if the board's not interested in a conversation or agenda item in regards to commissioners' compensation, then do we want to separate, and does the board want us as an agenda team to schedule a conversation in regards to compensation to the Justice of Peace and the Sheriff? And that will not, by our regulations, it doesn't require the Budget Committee to be called in for that conversation. So to try to be expedient and not waste time, I want to see if there's support or what the direction would be from the board as to those two items or one item as a whole. Mr. Sorensen?
I'd be interested in having a discussion of the executive elected officials compensation board and what they did and what they found and what they're recommending, and hear from them.
Okay. Others? Commissioner Lycan?
I would agree. And by the way, just, I know that I don't see him in here. This is not a vote. This is a head nod, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to schedule work, so yeah, this is far from approval. But do I have a third commissioner that would like to support scheduling this as an item? Sounds like the recommendation is an item to get a report from the elected officials compensation board, and then we can,
Including commissioners' compensation, so we have to have the budget committee here. Is that what we're talking about? Because I think that you kind of gave us a choice,
yeah, Commissioner.
whether with or without the commissioners' compensation, because that depended on what we schedule.
I think we could have a report from the board without a budget committee meeting unless we wanted to go.
No,
Christine, go ahead.
yeah. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Commissioners, so it's actually within your lane manual, so it is a commissioner rule, but that's where you have said that the recommendations go to the Budget Committee related to the Board of Commissioners compensation before they come to the board. So the Budget Committee would then make a recommendation to you as a board for the Board of Commissioners piece.
Okay, so what
we would
Commissioner Sorensen recommended was to hear a report from the compensation board, right? And what you're saying is that we would need to bring the budget committee in to receive that report at the same time, or it goes to the,
Typically,
budget committee is.
what we've done in the past, and I could verify with legal if we could change it, but we've held when we've wanted to bring it all forward, we will hold a budget committee meeting first. Have them just weigh in on the Board of Commissioners and bring the packet as one, if that's what you're wanting to do.
Okay.
with
All right,
all
so,
three of them.
so what I'm hearing is that if we would, is there 3 head nods to schedule a joint or a budget committee meeting, which would be the board and the budget members, to receive a presentation from the compensation board? Is that?
Yes.
So I'm seeing,
Yeah.
5 head nods. Okay.
All right.
So we'll work with the agenda team to try to make that happen expedient, or at least fit it into the agenda schedule with Ms. Jones and schedule that meeting.
Yes, and just so the board is aware, the charter actually dictates that Board of Commissioner compensation needs to be completed, if there's any change, be completed prior to the general election in order for it to take effect on the next odd year. So just timing wise, so that you're aware of, we'll get moving on it here in the next couple months to come back to you.
All right.
Well, Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman,
Sorensen?
haven't you kind of overstated that? We've lowered our compensation, and we didn't have to have an intervening election. It's only if we increase the compensation, because when we cut our salaries, we didn't have to wait for 2 or a year and a half.
Correct. I have the
Is that accurate?
There's no increase. You're right. I shouldn't
Yeah,
have used
okay.
the word change.
Yeah, okay.
Increase.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for the clarification. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ms. Moody, for hanging with us today and being here for this. So we'll make that a task.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other agenda team requests or work sessions? Okay. Mr. Mokahysky, could you give us the review of assignments?
I have 3 items, Mr. Chair. First, we'll schedule a work session with the draft ordinance related to tobacco-free parks proposal that would be consistent with the Park Advisory Committee's recommendation. Second, we'll schedule an executive session for next week related to the Forest Work Camp proposals. And third, we'll schedule a budget committee meeting to hear a presentation by the elected official compensation board.
Okay. Did I miss anything? All right. We do have an executive session. Before I do that, is there any other business that the board needs to take up before our executive session? Okay, seeing none, so I'll read us into executive session. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations and to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660 subsection 2D and E, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for purposes listed above. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to return back into public session should the need arise. So with that, we will move up to the Commissioners' Conference Room for our executive session. It'll start in about 10 minutes, and there will be a Board of Commissioners meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock upstairs in the Commissioners' Conference Room at 9 a.m. So with that, we will recess or move to executive session.